This channel is part of the History Hit network.
Years ago, a group of amateur archaeologists discovered a wealth of Roman finds in this park at Cheshunt in Hertfordshire. They were told to keep quiet about them because the British Museum thought they might be really important, particularly because a huge hoard of Roman coins had been found here at the turn of the century. Somewhere around here is Ermine Street, the main route to the Roman Empire's most northerly stronghold at York. Where we are now is about a day's march from London. So, am I standing on an undiscovered town, or a military marching post, or just a Roman little chef? Time Team have got 3 days to find out what these important finds are really telling us. Join us as we try to unravel the mystery of Cheshunt Park. Cheshunt Park is set on a hill overlooking the Chilterns and the Lee Valley, just 20 miles from London. It lies directly across the line of Ermine Street, the major Roman highway from London to York. But there's no sign of the road in the park today. Back in the 1950s, two families, the Mullingers and the Howletts, excavated the site. By 1964, they dug nearly 80 trenches. They didn't find Ermine Street, but they did uncover the fragmented remains of several Roman buildings. They'd no idea what they were, and even visiting archaeologists from the British Museum didn't know either. Jean Mullinger, filmed here in 1963, still lives by the park. Why did you ask us to come here in the first place?
Well, we thought that this had been hidden long enough, really. You know, we wanted something done about it.
Why hadn't anyone ever done anything about it before?
Nobody was bothered, nobody was interested. And my husband's dead, so there was just myself left to say something. So I thought I would.
Well, we're certainly very interested, aren't we?
We've been fighting for the park for a long while, and decided to see what they could do about this.
Why did your husband decide to dig here in the first place?
It was always a thing he had about Romans, ever since being a boy.
So he just thought there was something here?
He just felt there was something there all the time. And he took it from a military side, and he said they always went to the top of the hill. It was probably the first day's march from London anyway.
Yeah.
How did he work that out?
Well, he walked it himself from the manor house once in the wartime.
From a manor house in London, all the way here?
Yes. There wasn't any transport. Not down here.
But these weren't his grounds, were they?
Oh, no. No, they belonged to the Debenham family. And Miss Debenham, she freely gave consent. In fact, she came and helped.
History Hit is like Netflix, just for history fans, with exclusive history documentaries covering some of the most famous people and events in history, just for you. Our extensive catalogue of documentaries covers everything from the rise of Hannibal Barca to the illustrious treasures of King Tut. So sign up today for broadcast quality documentaries uncovering the mysteries of the ancient world. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and Odyssey fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Odyssey at checkout.
Phyllis Debenham's home, Cheshunt Park House, was demolished after she died, and the local council bought the park. She features in a fascinating diary of the whole excavation. There's also a very detailed plan, so detailed that it's almost impossible to follow. They dug their trenches in a box grid, and the drawing looks almost like a child's board game. The first thing we've got to do is to see how this grid relates to the meadow. As you can see, our people have cleared great swathes of this field so we can do the archaeology. And predictably, where Mick wants to dig is here.
Yeah.
What's going on, Professor? What are you doing?
Well, there were excavations here 40 years ago, which Jen's been looking at, and it looks as if we've got to go back over there, doesn't it, Jen, to get some of the remains?
Yeah, I think it's taken an awful long time to go through the archive, but now we've got the documentation and we're here on the ground. We know that some of the archaeology is under there.
So this means that our people are going to be sitting around in the sun for hours waiting for all this lot to get cleared.
That is just the point, Tony. It won't be for hours. I'm advocating getting a big machine in there to strip that out, not one of these little strimmer jobs.
Since the 1960s, the local landscape's changed completely. There are trees where the big house stood, and the brambles where Mick wants to dig conceal the garden and tennis court. Outside the garden railing, we're trying to locate the old plan on the ground.
Earlier on, I overlaid this plan
Yeah.
and the aerial photographs with the modern map and set out this area, which is where the buildings supposedly are.
Yeah.
And that's just over there.
We're hoping this group of buildings with their strange features will hold some clues to the size and scale of our settlement, whether it was a military stop, a trading post, or just a workshop. Our first trench will go in here to pick up this puzzling object, perhaps a snake-like flue or covered drain.
God, stone a crow's jam. This is like concrete.
In the 60s, they didn't have geophysics. We have. And John's got a completely new view of the meadow from the tests first thing this morning.
That's the iron railing along the edge of the field.
Yeah.
But then we've got all this noise here and a possible enclosure ditch.
Right, so this is occupation in here?
Yeah, look at the XY plots.
Okay,
I mean, such a contrast between here and out into the
It's
field.
very quiet out there, isn't it?
I mean, it looks as though that could be a building.
Yeah.
And when you look at the res,
Oh, crikey.
I mean, the high resistance in black, that's showing wall
that's
foundations.
Walls and so on, yeah. So it looks as if we've got a sort of round-ended structure there, doesn't it?
And that's where the ditch appears to cut through it.
So the obvious thing is to dig there, isn't it? Can you drop us on that?
Well, I've already done it.
Oh, we're there, right.
So John's trench will go in here, just a few yards from our first trench where Phil started digging. Now that we've got the digger in trench 1, we should have the old backfill out by mid-afternoon. We think that the best way of understanding this site will be to find out how the buildings relate to the road. Are they earlier or later? Did they run alongside, or were they built further back? So our next task has to be to find the lost Roman road. To the north of our site, Owned Street cuts a clear line through the Hertfordshire landscape.
Coming past the site here, Stu.
Yeah.
But looking at Cheshunt Park from the south, you can't see the road at all.
Something after the Roman period happens to that bit of landscape where that road no longer has any importance.
Right.
We do have some records of a medieval park here at Cheshunt.
Right, so
And-
they've dropped a park and crossed the Roman road alignment
Yeah.
and presumably made people go round
And
it.
that's exactly what seems to happen
Right.
even now.
Yeah.
It's almost like a perimeter road goes
Yeah.
round the edge of the park.
Yeah, so we ought to see it coming out the other side then, haven't we?
Indeed, and with a bit of luck,
Yeah.
we might see it coming through the park as a crop mark or a parch mark. It's very dry at the moment. It's ideal conditions for parch marks.
Yeah.
But actually, look, in that field further to the east, I think it's Mick through
Where
the
it took off.
cropped field.
Oh, yes.
Can you see that line going across it?
Yeah, there's a white line across.
That
isn't
looks
there?
like a parched out road, doesn't it?
Right, yeah.
That's really exciting to see it.
yeah.
It just bangs straight on the line of that road,
Absolutely
isn't it?
clear,
I mean,
it is, yeah.
That's one thing I think I've got to have a trench across that bit.
So Stuart might have our first new lead. Our incident room's in the local primary school. Carenza and Guy have met up with Ros Niblet, a Roman specialist from St Albans. The finds from the earlier dig suggest that something rather important was going on here.
Well, they're pretty tantalising, actually. We've got a complete roof tile here.
That's incredible.
The question is, does that come from a building, or are they making roof tiles here and perhaps using them in a different context? We've also got this rather unusual piece of pottery, which looks to me very much as if it's a waster. You see that distortion in the rim? Now, that means they might be manufacturing pottery here. What do you think, Ros?
Well, it's certainly warped, but there's this concretion on it which seems to be slag, which suggests to me it's been used for some other industrial process.
So what do we think generally is going on here then?
Very good question, but we have got a clue in the name because Cheshire seems to contain two ancient components, doesn't it?
That's right, and that makes it very unusual in Herts. The name's derived from two Latin words, chess from castra, meaning defended place or camp, and hunt from the Latin funta, well or spring.
It's mid-afternoon on one of the hottest days of the year, but surprisingly just a foot down, the ground's very wet. Sure sign of local springs.
Ah! Jan? Come and have a look at this. Oh, damn, look at that. It's that drain. It's the top of that drain, look.
What's that in the bottom there? Big
Well,
tiles?
I see big square tiles. I mean, in fact, I got in my pocket here. We ought to be able to pick these up. We got 20...
So Phil thinks this is a drain, but is it? And is it Roman?
This one here, this middle one, is a chimney. Grab hold of that.
So now we know exactly where we are, and the old plan's very accurate. In Trench 2, where we're looking for John's ditch, there's nothing so far but natural gravel. A few hundred yards away in the lower field, Mick and Stuart are chasing the parch mark they saw from the air. Is this the field where you thought we might get a Roman road? Because quite frankly, I don't see much evidence of it.
You've just walked straight across it.
What do you mean?
This lump behind
That
you.
earthwork behind you, Todd. When we were in the helicopter,
Yeah.
we saw this parch mark coming straight through this field.
Yeah.
And when you get down to this end, can you see this broad ridge starts here, comes up over and back down here?
Stuart, there's about a 2-inch difference in levels. You wouldn't find anything different in any field in England.
No, this is classically what you'd expect for the agra of a Roman road.
There was of a Roman road?
It's the metal in the line of the Roman road itself.
You have to say, though, that you'd seen this earthwork before we went up, and then to find the crop mark as well was brilliant, wasn't
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, all the evidence seems to come together there. I mean, if you don't believe it, Tony, while we were at lunch, John ran his race over, then you want to see what he's got as well.
Believe that?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Black and white and colour. It's not a dual carriageway.
And with this man, he's got the evidence.
Right.
So that's 3 different kinds of evidence
Yeah.
now. We've got the earthwork, and we've got the crop marks, and the geophysics.
Yeah, to have 3 pieces of evidence all point to it is brilliant, really. So we're going to put a trench across here now, hoping we can hit what should be a big stone bank underneath.
Excellent.
It's good.
How big's the trench again?
Well,
If Stuart's right and the line of the road follows the parch mark in the field, it looks as if the road could meet our settlement somewhere in the woods, near to where Carenza's ready, at last, to open Trench 4. It's impossible to do any geophysics here, so we've got no idea what we might find. We know there'd been a tennis court somewhere near here, but maybe no Roman archaeologists survived. Back in Trench 1, Phil's joined by Peter Reynolds. With his knowledge of Roman industry and farming, Pete should be able to tell us what they were making here. He too thinks the location of the road is all important.
So we really need to push the story this way because we know that the road is out there somewhere, and we've got this gap.
And we want to find out what happens between the road
And our building.
Yeah.
That's right.
Katie, how are you getting on?
Oh, it's just starting to look really good. You see this cobbly
Oh,
surface
crikey,
here?
yeah, look at that lot.
Oh, that's good, isn't it?
Well, that must be it, mustn't it?
This must be the surface of the road. And then just over here, you see this patch here? I think that must be the ditch that runs alongside it.
So we're all just on this side of the road. We need to go a lot further back to get the
we
other
still
side,
need to get
don't
the other
we?
side, yeah.
Well, you said it was anything up to 30 foot wide.
Yeah, I mean, presumably if there was any cobbles on the surface, they've now gone and been robbed away, and we're seeing here the bedding, as it were, for the road, aren't we? That's what it's looking like at the moment.
Yeah.
There's no time to extend this trench this evening, but we'll open it up to the full width first thing in the morning. Mick, the amateur archaeologists who were here 50 years ago found a lot of stuff and they recorded it beautifully.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
But they didn't really know what they'd got, did they?
No.
Are we anywhere near helping them sort it out?
I think we probably are, because of finding the road down the bottom end there. We've now got it in the trench, and we could see from the helicopter the alignment of it coming up the field across there.
So what does that imply for our archaeology?
What it means is that they thought the Roman road was that side, and therefore their excavations related to over there. We now know that the Roman road is over there, and it means that whatever this is down in these trenches is not right on the street frontage. It's somewhere in the back garden or up the back of the properties.
So what are we going to do tomorrow?
So tomorrow we move through into the bushes where we ought to be right on the street frontage, and that's presumably where the most important buildings are.
So today it looks as though we've been in the Roman back gardens and the Roman potting sheds. Tomorrow, let's hope we can get into the Roman houses and offices and whatever's there.
Yep.
Join us after the break. First thing in the morning, and everyone's out looking for Ermine Street. What are they surveying?
They're lining up the line of the Roman road through the woods.
Why are we still looking for the Roman road? We think that we've got it further down there.
Yeah.
And surely what we're after today is the fronts of the houses or shops or whatever it is that the Romans had, where we've been poking around in the back yesterday. Morning, Stuart.
Morning.
Morning. That's right, but until we know where the Roman road is on the exact alignment, we won't know where the shops are on one side or whatever it is on the other side. So we're going to put some evaluation trenches in here to look for the buildings, and geophys on the other side, seeing if there's any buildings on that side of the road. But we do need to know where the road is exactly to start with.
And we were excavating over there yesterday, so we're pulling the whole thing in.
That's why we're going to come back under the woods.
Yeah. In our first Roman road trench, Mick was expecting a stone bank, but all that's coming out is gravel and clay. Harvey Sheldon, the Roman specialist from London's just arrived, and to confuse matters even more, he thinks we're digging in the wrong place. In Trench 1, Phil's uncovered more of the Roman features. In the 60s excavation, their exact purpose eluded even the most eminent archaeologists, but Pete thinks he's cracked it.
Now, the only other place I've ever seen anything like this is where they wanted to superheat air to deal with metals.
Right.
The fire, I think, is this end, eh? And I think the hot air is being sucked through, and you've got a chimney there, so that's going to suck it this far.
So that's like acting as a draw through the piping.
That's it, okay? Then there's another one here. So once you've got that drawing, close it down, open this one.
Right.
Right? And then when you close that one down, you hope it's going to go down the last bit. And we got superheated gas coming through there into the charcoal. You're immediately going to be hitting 900 to 1,000 degrees, which is the kind of working temperature you want in order to deal with metal, iron, or whether you wanted to make bronze to pour it into moulds.
So is this thing naturally powered by air? You're not going to need bellows to fire it up?
That's the whole idea.
What, that you don't need bellows?
You don't need the bellows.
Right. So this is an earlier metalworking establishment,
I think.
So what's this on the top of it then?
Now I think we're looking at two phases.
Right.
When they excavated this, they found these piles of tiles, the pili.
That's the little squares.
The
we can
little
see
square
across the
tile
side,
jobs there.
Yeah. But presumably that is the flue.
This is the flue area. As the fire goes through here, we've got to put these piles of tiles back again in a pattern right across this floor, okay? Yeah. And it holds up a wooden floor.
Right.
Right? And then you've got a foundation wall all the way around there, and then probably a wooden shed over the top.
Right.
But Phil, this is where it's gorgeous for you. Okay? This bit, I think, is a malting floor. Diodorus Siculus mentions the fact that in Britain they grew grain and they grew barley and they made beer out of it, which he calls Xiphos.
Oh,
now,
a couple of pints of Xiphos.
Well, I think there's room for a brewer to start brewing a Roman beer called Xiphos. 2 pints.
So we've got London down only 15 miles down the road, of course. That's a big market for either the malt or the beer.
Yeah.
But just as likely, I suppose, is that there was a pub somewhere out on the front up against the main road.
It's so small, right? It's much more likely to be a local pub. with its own special brew.
That's my target for today. I want to find the pub.
In Trench 2, we'd been hoping to find the ditch at the back of the buildings. And at last, underneath all that gravel, some flecks of brick or tile are coming up, which suggest there's some sort of earlier deposit. In Trench 4, we're still pinning our hopes on finding some buildings closer to the road. Carenza?
Hi there.
How are we getting on? I can see that this is different colours, so presumably that's not natural.
Yeah, it's laid over the foundations of the tennis court. So we reckon the tennis court was laid out from there up to about here.
Yeah.
And then you see here, where you can see it's very different. It's all sort of much darker brown with flecks of Roman brick and tile in it. We think that's undisturbed archaeology, but it's an absolute nightmare to dig through at the moment.
Why is that?
It's incredibly hard. The trees here sort of suck all the moisture out of the soil, and it's like digging through concrete virtually.
Yesterday, John's Roman road geophysics were spectacular, but the archaeology in Trench 3 is inconclusive. So since first thing this morning, geophys have been looking for the road nearer to the woods.
We think it comes through the Land Rover.
Yeah.
And in this general direction.
Yeah.
So we're stood here now.
I can't see that very well, John. Can we get it in the shadow or somewhere
yeah.
too?
Well, let's go
We
back
can
in
get it
the
under the tree. Oh, that's
There.
a lot better.
Ah.
That's a lot
Oh,
better.
that
yeah.
is.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
So we're expecting the road to come somewhere on this line.
So you think that red is
I
it, do
think,
you?
well, it's possible. It's confusing that it appears to stop.
So where are we actually going to put the trench?
Well, I think across this line here.
It won't take long to get a trench in, and if this one comes up with the firm evidence we need, we'll know how close the road runs to our settlement. Cheshunt would have been about a day's march from London. When the Roman cohort stopped for the night, they'd have pitched a marching camp on high ground that was easy to defend. Friends, Romans, countrymen, I've gathered you here today because we're going to conduct a scientific experiment. We're going to see if surveying techniques have improved in the 2,000 years since the Roman occupation. What exactly was a Roman marching camp?
It's essentially a camp that we put up by a unit of troops on the march for their protection over the night.
So the surveyors would have sprinted on ahead of the troops and surveyed and built it before the rest got here?
I think it would depend upon the conditions. I think it's quite likely that the surveyors would be coming up under some sort of armed guard.
Well, you've got the guard. The cohort is marching up from London. That's, what, 500 men?
Yes, an auxiliary infantry cohort would be about 500 men.
They're going to stay here the night, so you've got to lay out the marching camp for them. You see this road here? That's going to be this road here. You're going to do that side of it. Henry, you're going to do that side of it. How does your one work?
This is a gromart. Right, that goes on top of there. That's across, it's called a stela. Right, it's a line of sight instrument using strings. You've got 5 strings hanging down with weights on the end, so they all act as plumb lines, so they're all vertical. We can line this up down the centre of our road.
By sight?
By sight. My assistant here will go down there with a pole, and we will get a line down there. Now, because the cross at the top has got a right angle in, you can now walk around here, look down a line of sight again with these 3 strings. Because you've got a cross at the top, this is vertical. Where our datum peg is will be our first corner of our section.
So basically it's simply about making straight measured lines?
Absolutely, using strings.
How do you do that?
Well, I don't use strings. I don't have to untangle
Oh,
strings.
you don't have to untangle strings. This is going to get really dirty.
Instead of bits of string and sight lines, I'm using lines between me and satellites orbiting the planet. So by triangulating the crossovers between these signals, I can compute a point on the ground.
How long do you think it'll take you?
Within the hour, I should have it done.
Do you all know what you're supposed to do?
Yep, thanks very much.
Here's your maps.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Harvey will be the final arbiter. Good luck. May the best man win.
Thanks, Tony. Right, well...
Good luck.
All right, race you.
An hour? Well, maybe. The Romans loved their right angles. This groma is a replica of the type of instrument used to mark out Pompeii. We'll catch up with the marking out of the marching camp a little later. Phil, who's looking for another piece of the road, isn't sure if he's hit the remains of the surface or just natural gravel. Jenny's opening a new trench to look for more buildings between the road and our brewery in Trench 1. In Trench 4, there are plenty of finds, but no foundations.
And I wonder if we haven't got a fire here, because here's a roof tile. That's the way it goes up.
Yep.
If you look underneath, all that conspicuous burnt carbon, do you see?
Yes, yeah.
So what we might have is a building going on fire, the roof collapses, and that settles down on top of one of the burning rafters, which of course is completely burnt away, just leaving that carbonised residue underneath.
So other buildings surrounded the brewery, even if they burnt down. Over in Trench 5, Phil's found what he thinks is a road ditch.
You can see here, this is the natural orange clay. And you see it there, and you can see that it's bright orange clay there. And the bit in the middle is this grey stuff. You see, it's much different colour, darker grey colour. And in places, there are minute little fragments of brick in it. That's the infilling that's actually filled it up. And to my mind, it's the sort of thing that you'd actually get alongside of a Roman road.
If it is a road, then I'd have expected to see more solid foundations. But if Phil can find another ditch on the other side, it must be the road. On the other side of the hill, millions of pounds worth of technology are up against pieces of string. Well, Henry's finished pegging out his section, and our Roman surveyors will find out how long they took tomorrow. Archaeologists, academics, surveyors, will you have a look at this? This is what the children at the local school have just shown me. What is this?
A road.
And what uniforms are these people wearing?
Roman.
Therefore, what kind of road is this, Katie?
Roman road.
It is a Roman road. Have we seen anything remotely like this over the last day and a half? Yesterday morning, you were so excited. You promised me you'd found a Roman road, you'd seen it from the air, you'd seen it at ground level, you'd seen it under the ground. Where is it? All we've got is a desultory piece of gravel.
Oh, goodness, Tony, we still got it. All the evidence you've just articulated, it's all still there. It's telling us a big Roman road came up through here, and I think what we're seeing is a ghost of where it was. It was never ever going to be like that with nice big cobbles on top of it, was it?
I'm just still not convinced though, because the gravel that we've got is actually sitting in what looks like to be ditches. It's not. There's not a piece of gravel with ditches either side.
And what do Roman roads have on either side of them?
Ditches.
Ditches.
But not with gravel in them.
If the Roman road has slipped, which they do, and the course changes, ditches get filled in. That's been seen on other excavations. That road is there, and then it's coming through here.
Maybe our preconceived ideas are wrong.
What did they build these Roman roads out of? Presumably not tarmac.
Well, here in Hertfordshire, they built it out of gravel and clay. They put a bank of clay and rammed some gravel in it. That's what they had to have.
So the classic sort of view that I've seen of different layers and so on is a bit of a model, a bit of an ideal, is it really?
Certainly, as far as this neck of the woods is concerned, they didn't follow the textbook. They did it as cheaply and quickly as possible.
Using the local stuff,
What's up, Phil?
Boy, great news. Pot. Roman pot.
Oh.
I bet you can tell me a bit more about it than that, but...
That is the best piece of news we've had all day. We've been talking about Roman roads. We've been speculating about Roman roads. This means it is a Roman road. Absolutely. This is 4th century pottery. So it is a complicating factor, because that means it's looking like a later road. And we've got other road surfaces around, so this isn't quite what we expected.
But you know, I don't really give a damn how old it is. I'm just so overjoyed to get any pot
absolutely brilliant.
at all.
In Trench 2, I thought we were looking for signs of a ditch at the back of the buildings. Now, all of a sudden, an almost complete pot's coming up.
So what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's one of these, black burnished kitchenware
Storage
jar.
pot.
Made right the way down the southwest in Dorset.
Right.
So what on earth is it doing here?
Yeah.
Well, one of the answers is it's sold in vast quantities to the military right the way up in the north.
Right.
As well.
Which makes me think that this Tom was right, this was military stop.
Well, it's quite possible, but I mean, it does give us a date because it's a 4th century jar. 4th century time.
What's it in there? Is it a ditch or a pit or something?
I think it's been thrown away, discarded as a piece of rubbish into what looks like some sort of pit or trench, yes, and then it's just been filled in over.
Right.
Do you use that kind of earthenware for cooking? After you've had a few meals out of it, it's going to become contaminated with the foodstuffs. It's not glazed, so it's completely useless. So they just chuck it away. It's a totally different set of values. We think that's something nice. We put it on the shelf and look after it.
Yeah.
But no, for them it's a universal container. Bung it away, get another one.
Is she coming out?
If this is a rubbish pit, then we're much more likely to be at the back of the buildings by the ditch. Just before it was thrown away, this pot might have contained food or drink made in Cheshunt, even sold at the roadside pub, perhaps to passing soldiers. It's been a very frustrating day today. If we have found Ermine Street, it's not very clear, and until we're absolutely sure, we can't make sense of our settlement. Join us after the break when in our final 8 hours we uncover the finds and clues that we need to give us a clear picture of what the Roman cohorts would have seen when they marched through Cheshunt nearly 2,000 years ago. Beginning of day 3 and Mick's dragged me off into the woods again. What are we doing here this time?
Well, I thought you ought to come and see a stretch of the Ermine Street that's much better preserved than we've got on our site. And although a lot of what you can see is sort of medieval, later woodland and all the rest of it, this big, wide embankment that we're on is actually the agger of the Roman road as it runs north from our site.
So it's not just this little bit of track?
No, this is a later track,
yeah.
But the bits between the ditches from over there to over there...
So it's right from somewhere here,
yeah,
all the way, kind of over to this tree line and beyond.
That's right. And
they were big, weren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, the area's defined by the ditches, and of course, all that we're doing today is about finding the ditches. Even if the metalling of the road has gone in the middle, then the ditches define the width of the road as it ploughs through, and we've got to sort that out in relation to the settlement.
It is incredible, actually, even though these trees wouldn't have been here in Roman times and the whole environment would have been quite different. You really do begin to get a bit of a sense of what it would have been like when Roman legions were marching down the road, don't you? Did you go back?
I thought you'd gone there for a minute.
It looks as though all our hard work's about to pay off. Our surveying team are now able to tell us that Ermine Street runs through the woods 10 yards from where we're digging. Mick'll put a new trench on the roadside because we're still uncertain about what happens where our settlement meets the road, whether we've got a military canteen or a roadside pub. There's plenty going on at the back of the buildings. We've another find in Trench 2, where we lifted the storage jar last night.
Seems to be a black burnished dog dish type, but of course they weren't used for dogs. It just looks like a modern dog dish. A bit like a large cereal bowl.
Mick, we seem to have the line of Stewart's Road over there where Kerry is, don't we?
Yeah. That's the ditch on this side of the road. The road's beyond that.
And is this an extension to see where the two join up?
It's the beginnings of it, and there's already stuff in there that Katie's finding.
What have you got, Katie?
Well, at first we were really worried that the tennis court that was built here in 1904 has actually damaged all the archaeology. But in actual fact, it stops around here somewhere where all this rubble core is. And then we've got a feature going through here, which may be a wall of a building. And then we've got a cobbled surface, which may be a street or a courtyard or something like that.
But Ros, you're not nearly as interested in Stewart's Road as you are in this little funny bit here.
That's right, and I think we need to sort out what that is and how it relates to the ditch over there, and how everything relates to what we've got in here.
Which ditch over where?
The ditch over here.
This is in this trench?
Yes.
On the far side of the
that we dug
big, long
yesterday. This one here.
Well, there's hardly anything there, is there?
It's a wonderful ditch full of black silt where the pottery was found.
Why is that so significant?
Because of the date of the pottery and particularly because of the alignment of the ditch. We know from the geophysics, which this is it, this is the ditch or part of it, it probably went on here. But the interesting thing about it is it's a slightly different alignment to that of Ermine Street, but it's on just the same alignment as a whole landscape of banks and ditches over in that area on precisely this alignment. And the interesting thing about them is that they predate the medieval park, and they appear from the pottery here to post-date in the very late Roman period.
So does that mean it could be Dark Ages?
It could well be, yes.
And that's a period we hardly know anything about, is it?
Virtually nothing about it in this part of Hertfordshire. It could be extremely important to the history of the area.
So where do we put the trench?
We dig a trench along here, not...
Come on, Mick.
I am. I don't do running.
Just where?
Just about here.
You with us, Mick?
Yeah.
Now, you want to dig a pretty big trench over here.
Not that huge, but going through there.
Quite big.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ros wants to dig a trench just here.
Yeah.
Have we got time to do both of them in the few hours?
Well, I don't know really. I think it depends what Ros is thinking of here. I mean,
I'm thinking of a small trench coming out here.
well, I mean, would you do this with a machine?
Carefully, yes.
Well, in which case we probably could, yeah. I mean, I think that's very important in there. We need to concentrate on that area.
You don't want to dig this other one, do you?
Well, I'm interested in these alignments. I think they're probably later, but, you know, yeah, I mean, if it's small and we...
You're such a diplomat. I know your body language. He's not convinced at all. We'll dig it, all right? All right?
Yeah. Screw his neck sometimes, don't we?
So if Ros is right, this settlement could have been in use into Saxon times, although Pete thinks they'd have had to survive without the brewery.
We've got the flue in position so that the hot air comes from the fire, goes under the floor, and then comes up through the three positions in the side walls and the back wall, fills the whole of the interior with hot air. And you can regulate that between about 5 to 10, 15 degrees, right the way through to 100 degrees, to malt the barley. And then you've got the wooden floor over the top. Because when this blew, they got the temperatures wrong. And they burnt the whole thing down. Because when they excavated, the whole of that timber superstructure fell into the middle.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Does that happen often?
Well, it seems to be a regular occurrence when they were making beer.
Never a dull moment alongside Ermine Street. But what happened on Ermine Street itself? What were these roads used for?
Were they just for moving Roman armies about?
A lot of the movement would be of troops, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
essentially it's the movement of communications which is important too.
Right, is that this Roman imperial post I keep hearing about?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And that would be serviced by a range of stations along the roads at frequent intervals.
And what sort of speed could they move messages and information? I mean, if you've got somebody in Rome and he's trying to send a message to somebody in York, you know, is that going to take months to do that?
Well, there are one or two literary references which survive from the empire, which do show that at times of crisis, information can travel at, well, more than 100 miles a day. I mean, presumably,
Crikey, that's
presumably,
very-
well, we must be dealing with relays, I should think,
Well, yeah,
passing
I mean-
information on.
So if this place wasn't an official post, it was just on the main road, what would you expect to see there?
I personally believe that most of the places along the main roads have actually got an official nucleus to them. And obviously, if you've got Roman soldiers or Roman officials of any other sort, you'd expect to see the sort of buildings and the sort of amenities that they would be used to in their forts and fortresses.
So we're talking about pubs and brothels and places like that, at the very least, by the sound of it.
Well, I think we would, you know, if soldiers are getting money, there'll be people there who will be providing goods and services of various sorts for the later period.
At last, there's something to see in Trench 4.
We think it's a timber building. You can see it's got a nice right angle turn there, very sharp edges. I think it's actually been set out parallel to a cobbled street that we had coming along here. Now, we've taken all of that up now, but it did come along here. And then underneath it, we have this feature coming through here, which I think it's a load of flint packing that's a foundation for something, but something quite big. So we've got a late Roman phase,
Excellent.
3rd, 4th century maybe, and something a bit earlier underneath.
That's
perhaps.
looking good actually, because that seems to indicate what we've got at the moment. This is where you are.
Right.
This is the Roman road, the main Ermine Street coming through. It's in those trees over there. We've got 3 or 4 ditches now. We've got pottery out of them and ditches and so on.
Time's running out. Kerry and Ian are clearing space for our last trench here. Roz's trench is also underway to see how the boundary ditch relates to the settlement and the settlement to the road. But as the minutes tick away, Stuart's desperate to prove that he's been right about Ermine Street from the start.
Hey Harvey, you found my Roman road yet?
Yeah, I think at this time we have actually, Stuart.
Oh, fantastic.
There's a very nice ditch running through here,
yeah,
which has got Roman pottery, and it's not clear what's happening on the other side of it, but it comes up and you begin to get on this side of it layers of gravel, which are actually rising through here, all the way up, a bit loose, affected by trees' roots, I should think. The surface is higher than the modern ground surface.
That's the ditch on the east side of the road, and it's...
Yep, it looks to be. And then if you come over to where Phil is, he's got more of the metalling, which has also got some Roman pottery in it.
This is where we got the real crucial evidence of the road, Stuart. This stuff here, this gravel, is the actual road surface.
Excellent.
I mean, when I dug it, it was really hard. You see at the bottom, there's big pebbles, and then above it, much smaller pebbles. Now that is individual loads of gravel going in to build up the level of the road. That is not natural gravel.
This is fantastic, isn't it?
This is the road surface.
You've got ditch this side, ditch that side, and a 16-metre wide carriageway in between. This has got to be Ermine Street, isn't it?
I think so.
Yesterday, we asked our surveyors to set out a Roman marching camp, pitting pieces of string against satellite technology. The big question, who did it quickest?
Can't tell a lie. It took me about half an hour to set out the principal points, compared to their 3 hours.
3 hours? The Roman soldiers would have been dead by the time they got here.
They started digging as soon as we put a line in, you know, because they wanted to get it all done.
How difficult was it?
We couldn't beat them for speed, so we tried for the accuracy angle.
How accurate were the angles?
Well, I went back afterwards and surveyed in their points to look at how close they were to a nice 90-degree angle, and on every case it was within a degree or so it was all right.
Well, you're patting yourselves on the backs, but if I look down there, I see a little dog's leg at the end.
Well, it's not as much of a dog's leg as we thought there might be.
Because we was using string to measure, I've got marked string, it's waxed against shrinkage, but of course over that distance, which I've never done before, we was obviously pulling the string. It's stretching, and therefore we nearly caught up with him coming down the hill.
I've never heard such a list of shabby, obscure excuses in the whole of my life. Now we can see what this camp might have looked like in Roman times. On arrival, the auxiliary would have thrown up a defensive ditch and rampart about 1 metre high. This would take about 2 hours, after which they'd pitch their tents. If they were under attack, half would dig and half would defend. Each tent could sleep 8 soldiers, with 2 on guard outside. The centurions, or officers, had their own separate tents at the end of the rows. The auxiliary would go to bed at dusk and get up at dawn, before taking down the whole camp and marching off to the next post. And with just 2 hours to go, Carenza's new trench turns out to be unmistakably Roman. Carenza, is this what I think it is?
It's a mosaic, if that's what you're thinking.
It is. Blimey. That's great news.
We were so surprised because Ian was opening this trench up down here thinking we were looking for the road, which we've all kind of forgotten about right now. Yeah, I mean, amazing. What we're fascinated about is the fact we've got a tiled floor here.
Yeah.
and then there's a gap between the two, which we think might be a timber partition between the two floors. And then this mosaic, which is made up of broken up bits of the same sort of tile here. But it's quite rough and ready. I mean, it doesn't look as if it's set in a mortar floor.
But even if it's rough and ready, it's going to be higher status, isn't it, than the brewing equipment out the back, which we had earlier on?
Exactly. It's definitely the fancy end of the building. So this is like the public bar rather than the storeroom round the back.
So what are we going to do now?
Well, it's stopped here by the tennis court, so there's going to be nothing more of it here, but obviously it's vanishing into the side of the trench. So there's a possibility that this might be the wide border around a much finer mosaic in there.
Wouldn't that be great?
We've got to find out.
It's 10 to 4. We've got a lot of trenches still open that need recording and
Oh, so you'd like
digging.
to stop on this one then?
No. I'm with you on this one. Let's get digging. Everyone's working flat out to find more buildings. There's now so much coming up that no one's sure whether we're looking at a side street lined with shops and houses leading on to Ermine Street, or a series of commercial buildings one behind the other. Although Ros hasn't found any later deposits, she's uncovering evidence of burning, and there are more wall foundations with floors between. Victor's already made up his mind what the street frontage looks like. Although Ermine Street hasn't presented itself as a textbook Roman road, there's no doubt in our minds that we've found it. And that makes understanding our group of buildings much easier. Pete, this is just a field now, but what was going on here 2,000 years ago?
Well, I think what we've got is a beer production system.
How does it work?
This is where we have a flue. We've got a grain malting floor in here on a raised floor, so you've got hot air coming through, making it germinate, then killing it off. When you've finished with that, what you can do, process it, more heat, and on this particular bulk here, what we've got is an area of burning over there, and then as we look towards this way, we've actually got butts of stone walls, look. And next door to them, there's a hearth. So it's the next process.
Yeah, it's a lot of heat and heating water up needed, isn't it?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You've got lots of heat, lots of boilings up, and at the end of the day, you end up with beer. So as we come through here, the road over there, we think we found where they sell it, the pub.
And this is the pub?
We think this is the pub.
Coming in, gentlemen.
Yeah, there we are. Off you go.
Now then, down here, we've actually found a tessellated floor. And if you look just on the side there, we think there's a slot running through. And maybe where Phil is the bar.
So we're looking at Roman lino, in fact.
Phil, you're in your element. You're where you've always wanted to be. You're right in the middle of a pub.
Well, of course I am, Tony. It wouldn't be me, would it, if I hadn't got something to drink off it too?
Oh, thank you.
That's right.
Jean, when you were here 40-odd years ago, you found 2 pieces of tesseract,
Yes, we
didn't
did.
you?
Yes.
And so you left the floor for us.
Yes, yes.
I hope you think that the archaeology that we've done is up to your standard.
Better, much better. And I think you've done a marvellous job. I wouldn't have missed this day for anything.
Cheers, my dear.
Thanks.
Cheers. So our settlement had a pub. Shall we call it the Centurion's Head? Which was making its own xiphos in a big building at the back. It might have been the heart of a small group of shops and hostelries, earning their living from the passing trade on Ermine Street. On either side, a butcher, baker, the sandal maker, not forgetting our metal foundry, probably all grew up around a well. And of course, any good settlement would be protected by a ditch at the back. Over many years, this place became known as Cheshunt, derived from the old words Kestra Funta, the defended place by a well.